to areas like Chushul, sling flying tanks to forward locations using Chinooks, deploying heavy artillery in the Kailash ranges, innovating on durable heating systems to keep our Jawans warm through the harsh winters are some of the takeaways for which we could thank the Chinese. Many of these things would have happened over a period of time anyway. But Ladakh's standoff provided an immediacy which was grabbed with both hands by the national security leadership. The skills acquired mean we are an even more battle-ready army than before. The deployments have cost around rupees 100 crores per day, peaking to rupees 200 crores per day in winters. This was just for the boots on the ground. Remember, we also had our biggest Air Force mobilization in recent memory. If the Chinese blinked, it was in good measure also because the Indian Navy deployed to max in the waters of Malacca Straits and beyond to the South China Sea. It was a warlike mobilization with warlike costs, even if no bullet was fired. That must have been one of the objectives of the she-headed Central Military Commission, to inflict debilitating costs during the wobbly pandemic period economy. You know what? In the case of Pakistan, when General Pervez Musharraf sabotaged the Lahore peace process, Nawaz Sharif could say that Pak Army does not report to civilian government. In the case of China, the People's Liberation Army takes its guidance from the she-headed Central Military Commission. So obviously Galwan was orchestrated by the Chinese president. If this was the intent, what should we be doing? China sees India as a present competitor and a potential future threat that needs to be kept on tenterhooks, even taken off balance occasionally. This much is explained by the now clear, if unstated, policy of not resolving the border question. From Ladakh now to Doklam in 2017, to Chumar in 2014, and Depsang and Demchok earlier, all fall in a pattern of what has come to be known as the Chinese salami slicing strategy, going back all the way to 1959 and before. Not that India is singled out for this strategy. China shares land borders with 14 countries to its east, west, and north, and has maritime boundaries with another 6 in the South China Sea. Leave aside those in Central Asia, where it has made some adjustments aimed at earning goodwill at the expense of territorial claims. China has standing border disputes with a majority of these 20 neighbors. And you might be surprised with Russia also. Sometime in July of 2020, our ideological friend and brother, Putin, was also not spared by Xi. A tweet by the Russian embassy showcasing history of the Vladivostok port drew flack from Beijing, with official Chinese media countering it by claiming that till 1860 the famous Far Eastern port town was in fact Chinese territory. In 2018, the Chinese embassy of the southern Pacific island state of Tahiti rented a residence for the ambassador. On completion of the term of the lease agreement, the owner wanted the property back. China flatly refused, offering to buy out instead. Apparently, they had built some snooping infrastructure, radars, etc., and did not want to give up on those despite the Tahiti government offering alternative sites. Now, who bullies with a private citizen of a tiny country? Seems only China can. China has claimed entire Mount Everest as belonging to Chinese territory, scaring poor Nepal. And in June 2020, the same time that it launched the Ladakh misadventure against India, China claimed the Sakting Wildlife Sanctuary in Tashigang district of Bhutan as its own. Imagine, the place is lower than Tawang in terms of latitude and gives you an idea of Chinese browbeating of even the smallest of its neighbors. How does India steer this fundamentally altered relationship now? It is unlikely that there is going to be a short-term solution to this. India has shown to the world how to engage with the bully. Even as our defense forces look the dragon in the eye in Ladakh, the Modi government has been calibrating an aggressive economic equivalent of guerrilla war on the Chinese business interests. India set an example by banning TikTok, and later changing rules to constrain Chinese investment into our country. Parallel push for manufacturing, particularly in cutting-edge technology like semiconductors, has seen dynamics slowly changing on the ground for China. At 4.6%, the GDP growth recorded this quarter was slowest in the last 1 year for China. Some in China's policy community already see a threat in India's rise, and containing India on the economic side might be their best bet. The rise of Chinese manufacturing in the 1970s was a black swan event for the United States, putting it on the road to deindustrialization, which has resulted in today's Thucydides trap that the USA finds itself in with China. And increasingly, it seems like a losing battle. The Chinese thinkers realize if India rises, they might be facing their black swan with us at this moment. Maybe all this was also weighing heavy on the Chinese military minds to agree for the border detente. Economic survey of this year spoke of tackling the adverse balance of trade situation where India imports much more than it exports to China by turning Chinese trade with India into FDI. The suggestion was endorsed by government's think tank, the Niti Aayog. Industry bodies like the CII have been demanding a review of regulation to ease Chinese investments and visas to allow faster infusion of both capital and expertise. This week's detente should help mobilize opinion in favor of such a move. While a US $5 trillion economy is a low-hanging fruit, we must think bigger and see ourselves as the second largest economy in the world by 2047. Prime Minister Narendra Modi understands that, thus putting India as a developed country by our 100th year of independence as one of the national objectives in his August 15 speech from the Red Fort last year. Between the Europe war and the Taiwan crisis and what's happening in the Middle East, global forces are aligning in a manner that it would not be easy for the Chinese to be the engine of growth for the world on a sustainable basis. The diversification makes India the right candidate at the time. We must take the tide. Moving on. There was much brouhaha this week when the Chief Justice of India, Justice D.Y. Chandrachud, spoke of drawing inspiration from God while sitting in judgment over the Ayodhya case, which ultimately paved the way for construction of the Ram Temple in the birthplace of Lord Ram in 2019. Inauguration or Pran Pratishtha of the same temple months ahead of the general election this year was seen as BJP's attempt at encashing the strong Hindu sentiment around the development. The BJP never denied it, so shouldn't we. But this controversy occasions a thought in my mind. Is religion's intersection with politics typical of India in any manner? The secularism debate has in some ways determined India's politics since independence. Partition itself in 1947 was along religious lines, just that India under Gandhi and Nehru chose sanity. The US presidential election campaign is in the last phase, November 5 being the results day. Voting by mail is happening as we speak and might have covered substantial ground, though it might go down to the wire in swing states and swing counties. This week, Republican presidential candidate and former President Donald Trump appeared before a Catholic audience delivering a roast at the Alfred E. Smith Foundation Memorial Dinner. The Al Smith Dinner, as it is called, is an annual pin-up in New York City's calendar of events to raise funds for Catholic charities supporting children of various needs in the Archdiocese of New York and hosted by the city's Archbishop. It is organized in honor of Al Smith, New York's 4 times governor who rose through poverty to become the first Catholic nominated for president by a major party. He was Democrat nominee in the 1928 elections and lost to Republican Herbert Hoover. I would recommend a watch for the dinner speech by Trump to understand in detail and with amazing hilarity the influence religion has on American politics. Listen to some of it.
I didn't like Biden very much, and now I like him quite a bit. You know, And now I say that she's much worse than him. He was a much better candidate than her, actually. And when we hopefully win, dispose of her, I like her a lot, but right now I can't stand her. It's true. I can't stand her. I've never liked people that I was competing against. When you do, a lot of bad things happen. And we are doing well. By the way, the votes are starting to come in. You got to get out and vote. And Catholics, you got to vote for me. Just remember. You better remember I'm here. And she's not. I could have done that too. If you really wanted Vice President Harris to accept your invitation, I guess you should have told her the funds were going to bail out the looters and rioters in Minneapolis, and she would have been here, guaranteed she would have been here. But many of you are Manhattan liberals from the media and the Democrat Party. I always say the Democrat, you know, Chuck doesn't like that. He likes Democratic, and it sounds much more beautiful, the Democratic Party. I always say the Democrat Party because it sounds worse. It is true. He likes Democratic. Why don't they just change the name? This way, you know, it is Democrat. But I must say I was shocked when I heard that Kamala was skipping the Al Smith dinner. I'd really hoped that she would come because we can't get enough of hearing her beautiful laugh. She laughs like crazy. We would recognize it any place in this room, and all polls are indicating I'm leading big with the Catholic vote, as I should be, as I should be.
Did you hear that? Catholics should vote for Trump because he came to their dinner, which rival Kamala Harris is spurned. In fact, there are reports that after the kind of virality Trump's Al Smith dinner speech caught, Kamala vented on her campaign manager, Julie Chavez, for having advised against the participation. The Democrat candidate supposedly told Chavez that if she loses on November 5, her absence from the Al Smith dinner should be to blame. But that's how the political divide plays out along religious lines, or religious divide along political lines in US politics. While delivering another stump speech when Kamala faced shouts of "Jesus is our Lord" from a section of the crowd, she hit back by saying, "You are at the wrong rally then." Listen in.
With the intention that they would undo the protections of Roe v. Wade, and they did as he intended. Oh, you guys are at the wrong rally. No, I think you meant to go to the smaller one down the street.
The Democrats, of course, constitute the liberal secular pole of American politics, and for Kamala to say what she said on being interrupted buttresses claims of her being far left of the Democratic establishment. When Kamala was obstructed with "Jesus is Lord" jibe, she was speaking on a contentious issue in American politics, and one that is directly connected with Christianity and the Bible, that of Roe v. Wade. It's a 1973 Supreme Court ruling which allowed women the freedom of abortion. Since then, Roe v. Wade has been a looming presence in every presidential election as an issue of women's right to choose. This election also, the most combative part of the Trump-Harris debate on ABC, was the one where the two sparred over their respective positions on abortions, with Kamala accusing that if he becomes president, Trump would orchestrate a national ban on abortions. Despite his conservative position, Trump took a centrist line, saying he would let the states choose. Incidentally, the Supreme Court of the United States overturned the Roe v. Wade in 2022, ending the constitutional right to abortion, ironically during a Democrat administration. A biblical debate there on a core Catholic belief that censures abortion as against life. As a conservative, Trump has been at it for a while. Speaking at West Palm Springs, Florida on July 27, Trump announced that he would be setting up a federal task force on fighting anti-Christian bias, and its mission would be to investigate all forms of illegal discrimination, harassment, and persecution against Christians in America. The fact that a presidential candidate has to make such a promise shows the salience of majority Christian sentiment in the United States. In fact, identity politics is as deep-rooted in the US as in any other part of the world, including India. And the so-called liberal space politicians are neck-deep into it. Listen to Obama.
So if you don't mind, just for a second, I'm going to speak to y'all directly and say that when you have a choice that is this clear, when on one hand you have somebody who grew up like you, knows you, went to college with you, understands the struggles and pain and joy that comes from those experiences.
Did you hear that? Obama, that epitome of liberal sentiment, not just in the United States, but around the world, is asking blacks to vote as blacks for Kamala Harris, who grew up black, and not as citizens of the United States who should be free to choose based on how their bread is buttered. I recall a speech, in fact, Barack Obama delivered in his early years as president at the Al-Azhar University in Cairo, Egypt, where he mentioned how Azan influenced his spiritual being during his growing up years in Indonesia. Obama later used that speech and the occasion to make his Muslim outreach for the Middle East conflict. Though it's a different matter that a more transactional Trump got much greater success in the region, his efforts culminating with the Abraham Accords, which have withstood the ongoing war between Israel and Iranian proxy forces from Hamas to Hezbollah to Houthis for over a year now. On identity politics, there's a group called White Men for Harris that seeks to create an impression that Kamala Harris is not about blacks, Hispanics, Mexicans, and migrants alone, that she is as much about the mainstream white male America. So much for all the modernism and postmodernism. Role of religion in American politics goes back to its founding years. President Abraham Lincoln issued Proclamation 97 in the year 1863, appointing April 30 every year as the day of prayer and fasting. The presidential decree recognizes the authority of God over affairs of men and nations, and goes on to ask citizens to abstain from their secular duties for a day and dedicate themselves to the Lord in prayer. The same Lincoln, in his second inaugural address, described the two warring sides of the Civil War thus: both read the same Bible and pray to the same God. In God we trust, says the dollar, and don't we love it? Thanks for watching.
Director, the taste of success.
Our message is clear. All those who threaten the state of Israel and seek to drag the region into wider escalation will pay a heavy price.
איראן עשתה הערב טעות גדולה, והיא תשלם על כך.
can now confirm that we have concluded the Israeli response to Iran's attack against Israel. We conducted targeted and precise strikes on military targets in Iran, thwarting immediate threats to the State of Israel. The Israel Defense Forces has fulfilled its mission. If the regime in Iran were to make the mistake...
This is Republic Kuchina Studio, your one-stop destination for all the breaking news updates. I am Shivangi Shukla. Let's get started.
Since 2014, there have been 1,357 incidents of terror in Jammu and Kashmir, which have resulted in casualties. As these attacks are increasingly desperately as the cover of winter nears, and the Pakistanis will be doing their classic and stale and pathetic trick of trying to push through terrorists en masse into Kashmir, which has been largely peaceful since the blood business of Azadi has been shut down in Jammu and Kashmir, and the lifeline of Islamabad has been asphyxiated. We need to adopt a much more aggressive strategy militarily to counter Pakistan. If we deliberate at a time like this, we can finish the job in days, not even weeks. We are calling the global shots. We are part of the global power play, and I think the time for the final solution is here.
The BSF is strengthening its anti-infiltration measures along the LOC as winter approaches. Officials assured that security forces are well prepared to counter any infiltration attempts. This effort relies heavily on coordination between the BSF and the Indian Army, which plays a pivotal role in ensuring regional security.
सभी सिक्योरिटी फोर्सेस बड़े कोऑर्डिनेशन से काम कर रही है और इस तरह के जिस तरह की थ्रेट्स हैं उसमें थ्रेट एनालिसिस करके हम देख रहे हैं कि इस तरह की इंसिडेंट आगे ना हो। ये विंटर से पहले थोड़ी कोशिश होती है, लेकिन हमारी एलसी पे सिक्योरिटी ग्रिड आर्मी के कोऑर्डिनेशन से बड़ी स्ट्रांग है एंड विल एंश्योर दैट इन्फिल्ट्रेशन के किसी भी तरह के अटेम्प्ट होते हैं तो हम उसको थ्वार्ट करें।
In response to recent terror attacks, security forces are diligently analyzing potential threats.
From Asia's largest news headquarters, setting the agenda for Bharat. You're watching Republic.
The face-off over a Waqf's claim in Karnataka is only intensifying now, and the government of Karnataka is now shifting the blame on an error in the Gazette notification. We'll get you more on that. Hello and very warm welcome. You're watching Republic and I'm Rakshita Mishra with you this Sunday afternoon. Let's get started with the top story at the hour.
बीजेपी जो भी बोल रही थी सच बोल रही थी कि किसान विरोधी है कर्नाटका कांग्रेस की सरकार और किसान